Welcome to the Voice of Retail podcast. My name is Michael LeBlanc, and I am your host. This podcast is produced in conjunction with Retail Council of Canada. The one and only Rob Garf, Vice President and GM for retail at global powerhouse Salesforce, is back on the pod, sharing exclusive insights and strategies for retailers and how they can win holiday and helping us get ready with predictions for an unpredictable 2024. Let's listen in now. Rob, welcome to the Voice of Retail podcast, or should I say welcome back? You've been a frequent guest and you've been really generous with your time. How are you?
Life is good, Michael. It's really good to hear your voice and be back on the show.
Well, I was thrilled this summer at Retail Council's store, you and I, and it's funny because we've known each other for years, but we'd never met in person. It felt like we had, but we had a great opportunity this summer to meet in person. You're a bit taller than I thought. But you're very handsome, so there you go.
Well, I appreciate that. It was a highlight, by the way, and it was a great show, too. I really enjoyed it. Yeah. Toronto that time of year was perfect. Yeah. And again, It was a huge bonus to see you in person.
You know, anybody in the industry is going to at least know your name, but maybe they heard our interviews before, or maybe not. Give us a little bit about who you are and what you do for a living. What's your background?
Yeah, absolutely. So here I am, Rob Garf, calling in from just outside Boston, Massachusetts in the States. And I am GM for retail at Salesforce. So I oversee our product and solution strategy. And I also see our industry insights team. So it's a group of, think about them as analysts who look out in the industry, understand where the market is going. And we do that through a lot of data. And most of that data is coming off our platform. Mm-hmm. We aggregate that up. We create a benchmark called the shopping index. We don't have any access to personally identifiable information, but it allows us to really have a bird's eye view of what's happening in the industry. And we publish that quarterly through our shopping index on salesforce.com, built on Tableau, by the way. Mm-hmm. And it really gives us an opportunity to have conversations like this in the all too critical moment of the holiday season.
I can't imagine anybody listening to this wouldn't know the name Salesforce, more than familiar. But let's talk about the scope a little bit and talk about what powers your insights. You just gave us a little bit of hint, but you are global and specifically you do have Canadian data. So tell us a bit about what that looks like.
For sure. Yeah. So number one, CRM with, of course, a huge lean into AI. And if you think about it in the context of retail, we are, in many cases, the platform that drives the consumer experience for retailers and brands across the entire journey. These days, consumers traverse 9 different touch points in any given shopping journey, according to our research. And we are really the platform, the unified platform to provide that across inspiration and discovery, purchase and buy, service and delivery, and really being able to drive long-term loyalty. And it's built on our data cloud, which allows our customers to have a single view. So if you think about all of that data flowing through the platform, all the taps, all the clicks, all the swipes across all the different touch points, we bubble that up. And given the size and the scale at this point, Michael, billions and billions of shoppers, we're able to slice and dice that. We can look at it by geography. As you said, the Canadian market is one of our larger markets, and also by vertical as well. And to be really clear too, because I think this is an important distinction, is we're looking at it from the industry back. So while it's based on data on our platform, we've modeled this out over the last 10 years to be the view of the entire industry, which becomes really helpful when retail executives are sitting in there during Cyber Week wondering how they're doing vis-a-vis their competition.
Yeah, I mean, it's the magic question, right? I see the numbers. Is that good? How is it going for everybody else? I mean, it is whether it keeps you up at night or wakes you up in the morning. It's what we all think about. Now, we're gathered here, as you said, primarily to talk about the upcoming holiday, but I want to start with your take on the state of retail. You and I were on the mic last year around this time, and we were kind of, are people going to hold off buying? Are they going to wait for deals? I mean, if we looked at the kind of the big events this year, we see as my friend and partner Steve Dennis calls bifurcation. You know, the digital native vertically brands are struggling, certainly on a valuation perspective, but also for growth. You see, like Walmart last week just announced $9 billion investment in stores, and e-commerce is kind of flatlining a little bit in terms of its growth. Any of this stuff familiar? Anything take you by surprise? And if I asked you, if we had an elevator ride up to your office or the Salesforce offices, how would you sum up so far the year from a retail perspective?
Yeah. So the elevator pitch, can I use the Salesforce Tower in San Francisco? Because I need a little bit more time than normal, if that's okay.
Sure.
It's actually a really common question I get, and it's more towards what does this mean for the holiday and beyond? And
Right.
I think it's important to actually look back a couple of years, and going back to the digital surge in 2020, what that showed us is we saw a 40% increase in net new digital shoppers. So with the growth, that was driven in large part because of people actually buying online for the first time, and also buying in whole new categories. Think about grocery, food, and beverages, which ordinarily anybody would go into the physical store to not only discover, but to actually purchase.
And that category alone probably had one of the biggest leaps, right? Because it was hovering in the 1-2%, and then then just for all the reasons we know, it had a huge leap forward. Some other categories didn't really leap forward; they were already pretty heavily online and omni. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah, we saw strong triple-digit growth through 2020, and it really held up through 2021 as well. And so what we saw in this time is obviously a balancing that was happening where digital saw a lot of growth and people couldn't go into the store. I mean, they were literally shut down. And so we saw obviously a decrease in offline shopping. And what the narrative has been, and you just hit upon it, Michael, is there's been a trailing off of digital growth over the last year or two. And yeah, that's kind of true, but it's not the full picture. First of all, what we look at as a CAGR over the last couple of years, going back to 2019, as we finish up this year, we're looking still at a 20 to 25% growth online. So that would be really strong in any given year.
That's a big number. That's a bigger number than I had in mind. I had low teens, but you're right. And from a CAGR perspective, that's super interesting.
Yeah. And low teens, by the way, we would be happy with that. Right. And though the other piece, and I know you and our friend Stephen are bought into this, and probably the leaders in making sure executives don't forget about this thing called the physical store, is a lot of the rebalancing is happening because people are doing discovery research online like they have for so long, and they're going into the physical store to purchase. And so we're seeing, again, a rebalancing happening there. Last click attribution really is a tough metric at this point because where you click last might not necessarily where you buy next. And also the point here is there's this interesting interplay we're seeing, not only for online influencing in-store, but what's happening in the store and how that's influencing online. And let me give you some big numbers here. This holiday season, we're actually predicting, $1.19 trillion of global online sales. And we define the holiday season as November and December. Well,
and now you define, just one quick question. You define those sales as what you and I might call core retail, right? So we're not talking Taylor Swift tickets would probably add another billion to that. So we're really talking.
That's a really good point. So
we're really talking merchandise in that number, or help me out with that.
You got that right, Michael. Thank you for that caveat. That's 100% correct. It's more of the merchandising category, so not experiences, not entertainment, not travel, not automotive. But of that amount, and I don't want to hop too quickly to the holiday, but I want to put a finer point on the point around digital and physical in the interplay is of that 1.19 trillion, just over 700 billion of that, around 60%, 700 billion of that will be influenced by the physical store. So that's whether the store associate is drumming up demand because they're service agents or stylists, or they're drumming up demand because they're doing social media and becoming influencers, or they're doing endless aisle and offering product that's not physically in the store. But they're also fulfilling that demand, right? If a product is bought online but picked up in or around the store or delivered from the store to the doorstep, that's also demand that's being influenced by the store. So there's this, again, narrative in the market that digital is dead. It's not. It's really leveled off, but it's more importantly of how do you create this seamless experience, removing the friction between online and offline, going back to the 9 different touch points in any given shopping journey.
Well, and to be fair, I'm asking you the wrong question, right? When really looking at e-commerce versus store sales is more and more a distinction without a difference. So to be fair, I'm asking you the wrong question because you're answering me the right question. Was it's all about customer sales, not which channel. Customers don't care about the channel, right?
Yeah, and it's still a shift, by the way, Michael, as you know, and you point out that we're all making. And I think there's some that are stronger than others, this bifurcation that we talk about.
Yep. All right, well, let's talk holiday. Black Friday, Cyber Monday. For here, of course, we also include Boxing Day. Now, in Canada, PwC and RCC Leger paint a more optimistic picture. And just for way of background, they don't do the data the same way you do. We just ask lots and lots and lots of people about their intentions, spending intentions. Deloitte asked a few less people about their spending intentions. The RCC Leger said people were going to spend more money, and in fact, more money than they'd spent per person in 5 years. Deloitte said it was going to drop a double digit. Where do you guys sit? What's your best thinking from what you see in the data and the trends that you've got on all those powerful tools of yours?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, we define the holiday season as November and December. And what we're seeing online, we're forecasting a global growth of 4%. When we break that out, we're thinking the Canadian market won't be as bullish as that. And we've looked at particularly Q3 and the beginning part of this holiday season, Q4, October and the first week of November. And we're seeing a high single-digit decline across those time periods. And so, though, again, we're not overly concerned about that. There's no retail executive that I'm talking to anyways who's overly bullish about their online growth. They want to get through the holiday. They want to move the product at high of a margin as possible, try to reduce returns and price changes, but then really come out of this year feeling a lot better about the foundation they've created going into next year. But again, why I'm not overly concerned about the Canadian performance is, again, you have to take all the factors into account in terms of the growth that we've seen so far over the last couple of years, the reemergence and the importance of the store as well. So we're as much looking at, and Tom talking personally with retail executives in Canada about the margin, but also loyalty. Obviously, you're buying a lot of gifts for the holiday season, but how do you learn more about not only the purchasing person, but the purchases where they're going to for the gifts, and creating that stickiness, finding ways to increase the share of wallet by providing new services, new products, and so forth to really increase that share of wallet and that stickiness.
So, I mean, you're sounding basically a note of I don't even call it a note of caution, but you're actually sounding more a note of optimism. And I've heard the same thing. It's like, listen, it's probably not going to be the best holiday we've ever had for a whole bunch of reasons, not the least of which is a lot of people bought a lot of stuff during COVID, and now they're maybe going to get 3 new Taylor Swift concerts announced in Vancouver. That's going to pull some money. Who is it? The Best Buy CEO called it funflation, which made me laugh.
Ooh, I like that. I'm going to use that. Yeah.
There you go. Funflation. People shifting their priorities. And you and I actually talked about this last year. We knew this was going to happen, that people were going to shift after buying a lot of stuff into buying or enjoying experiences. The one thing I wonder, you guys also have vendors, and you, as you said, you're here in market talking to retailers. Retailers are telling me, you need to see more innovation in the product to get people to buy it. Because, if I bought a computer a couple of years ago and pretty much now it's the same computer it was 2 years ago, I'm not going to substitute yet, right? So there's this interesting mix of the industry catching up with innovation and that kind of core consumer demand. Are you hearing kind of similar things that, the good news is eventually this will pass. Stuff will start to wear out, but there's a lot of stuff we all bought, right?
Yeah. No, I really like your perspective here, Michael. And it is an important thing to call out in that not everyone is created equal as it relates to the categories and the price points and the geographies. So again, it's almost unfair to just give this broad-based forecast, which, by the way, we do and a lot of others do as well. So, you got to start somewhere.
You got to start somewhere, right?
You got to start somewhere. But the point you're making is really valid in that, consumers are looking for innovative products. They're looking for a need, not necessarily a want. And so what are more of the needs that you can cater towards? I think another important point is that we are feeling some economic headwinds. And I was listening to some on the road financial analyst on one of the financial stations talk about the idea of the household and the household economy, and people having their household balance sheets. And what they're doing, and our data shows this, is people are taking more control over their balance sheets. And so that doesn't necessarily mean they're buying less. They're just being a lot more thoughtful about what they're buying, when they're buying. And so what does that mean in plain English? Well, people are looking for value. They're looking for feeling good and comfort as well. In economic or uncertainty in general, people kind of migrate to comfort, right? Whether that's comfort food or what you're putting on your body, on your skin. And so we are certainly see people a lot more discerning. That's why, by the way, traffic in Canada and globally has still been really strong. Online traffic, people are still going online. They're picking, they're choosing, they're being a lot more discerning around what they're going to buy. And so they're looking for good discounts, meaning value, and they're looking for the products. That's why private label is going to be hot this year, where you can show some value. And by the way, it's great margin for the retailers. They're also looking for comfort. That's why we're anticipating active apparel, active footwear being stronger categories. People looking for comfort both in their daily lives, both in business and pleasure. And so it's, again, important to peel this back a little bit. You brought up innovation. I think that's a really good point. I think it's also this idea of comfort and value. And I think those that are able to cater to that, a great brand that I like up in Canada, Decium, which owns The Ordinary, I really actually like their view of the holiday season. They have Slowvember, which means let's not try to create some urgency, but let's actually create some balance, and people can take the whole month of November, to decide when they want to buy, knowing they're going to get the best price at any point, not on a particular day. So that's my long soapbox to say, you kind of got to peel it back a little bit and understand where the winners and losers going to be this holiday season.
I want to shift gears a little bit and just talk about the evolution and this idea that we see happening, the China factory direct model, most likely, let's put a name to it, Shein and Temu. Now, we're really struggling in Canada to understand the scale, because the way Stats Canada measures them, they're not in the retail number, they're not in the e-commerce number, neither is Amazon, by the way, which is a real quirk to our data. They're called imports. Wayfair, same thing. Our data is really, I'm really worried that our retail data here from our official Stats Canada measurement is really not telling us the full story. And I think you got a better handle on it in the US in general. And from your experience, in Canada, any insights you can add? I see it as a real, what is it? I read some stat that Shein was now the biggest apparel retailer in the U.S. And I got to think, our markets are vastly more similar than different. I got to think they're pretty big here too. Any sense for the audience about how this model is affecting retailers this year? Yeah.
I mean, you look at app downloads, right? They're at the top.
Yeah, top, all the time. Right? Is it like McDonald's is only not McDonald's? I looked last week. The only one that was bigger was McDonald's, for God's sake.
There you go. And so, it's interesting. I was in Europe for the last couple of weeks, went to a couple different countries, and I had the fortunate opportunity to speak with one of the largest retailers, apparel companies in Europe, with their CEO, his direct reports and board. And one of the people in the meeting talked about tech intermediaries. So I told him I was going to borrow that term, and here I go. So I'll give him full credit. But tech intermediaries, and the reason why he brought that up and why it stuck with me is these companies you're talking about, by and large, okay, maybe Shein's a little different, are essentially platforms that have created traffic and excitement, and they've been able to now monetize it with very little inventory capital carrying costs, which is a quite amazing equation that any retailer would drool over in terms of not having to take on all the capital in order to ultimately sell something. And so I encourage retailers I talk about to think about these platforms as the next generation of the shopping mall. The shopping mall was really put into practice because of access. Access was the highway system. And what it brought was a destination for not only shopping, but eating and socializing and hanging out with your friends and family. And not dissimilar to the mall where, now the malls were able to lease to tenants because of all the traffic they were bringing. These platforms are doing something very similar. And so we see it as a movement, whether you call it embedded commerce or what we call shopping at the edge, because it's beyond the retailer's physical and virtual four walls. It's an important media. It's a very important media to play. And it's certainly taking market share as we look, because we've been following this space for nearly a decade. It continues to take market share from branded sites, from brick and mortar sites. And so it's something to look out for. At the end of the day, shopping used to be where retailers would pull the consumer through the funnel to their property. And now it's as much about pushing their brand to wherever the consumers are. And guess what? The consumers are hanging out in these destinations that you're bringing up.
Well, it's never a dull day. All right, last question for you. Advice time. And you've been given lots of great advice during our conversation, but let's hone in. 2 essential things retailers should focus on to win holiday 2023. And then one thing about thinking ahead to next year. What should be their overarching focus?
Now, of course, holiday 2023 is in basically full motion. So I'm not going to say the 2 things that might take a bit of time to implement.
Get ready for peak.
Exactly. But I will mention 2 things. One is social media. Don't sleep on social media. We're actually predicting that social media will have a 10 times higher rate of performance than traditional media as it relates to traffic. And so that is some money that can be pushed around and moved around in these last days, especially as you're seeing the performance over the first couple of weeks.
Do you include, just a quick footnote on that, do you include influencers like creating and fueling the social media? Like there's social medias into posts and being very creative on Instagram, but do you wrap into that thinking, an influencer strategy for as a successful strategy? Yeah,
so influencer strategy is extremely important. What I would say is your associates, your frontline workers are becoming the more genuine influencer. That number I just provided was primarily through social media, because we've actually seen a little bit of a pushback on influencers because consumers are getting pretty smart around it in terms of the economic model and it not being as genuine. So yes, it should be part of it, but
be careful.
Your strategy
and use your associates. That's just such a great point.
Because that actually brings me to the second broad point, which is the stores being such a critical point of your online strategy. We're seeing that after the shipping cutoff date, those retailers that have the ability for a consumer to buy online and then pick it up in and around the store or have it delivered to the doorstep will see a 7 times higher growth rate, online. And so that's essentially saying you're not confined by that shipping cutoff date anymore. You can extend the online window beyond in the past. So it's pretty exciting to see the store cementing itself as a critical portion of your online strategy. So social, one piece, which I think you can still have an impact on now. The store, just last minute, make sure you're scheduling your associates properly, make sure you're giving them the right tools and give them the right incentives. Because if they're picking and packing and shipping, that should certainly be on the dashboard and in the spiffs that you're providing to them.
Yeah, it's a great point. Now, before I ask you about 2024, I'm having a bit of a lottery about what do you think the biggest retail day of the Q4 is going to be? So Christmas this year on the 25th. That's an old joke, but it's on a Monday. I'm thinking it's going to be the Thursday before Christmas. Others are saying it could be Black Friday. Do you have a different opinion? Maybe it's the Saturday because people start buying groceries just for fun. If you had to pick a day, what would it be?
Yeah. Well, for online, we're going to pick Black Friday, believe it or not. So I know there's obviously a big spike for Cyber Monday for historical reasons, but Black Friday has really bubbled up, been one of the highest growth and the highest online. But I do see, the couple days before Christmas being an overall spike as well, because again, retailers aren't as confined by the delivery. A consumer could buy something 2 days before Christmas online, and as long as they know it's available for pickup the day before Christmas, they're in business.
Yeah. I did it myself last year, and not because, listeners, I was, procrastinating. It's just because that's the way it happened. Kidding. All right, 2024. What should retailers be thinking about as I'm sure you guys are looking forward and your product teams are looking forward 2024? One thing people should be keeping in mind.
Yeah, so I'm going to say two things. I know you said one, but I'm going to give two.
Bonus. One is, I like that. Like we're retailers. We like bonus things. It's a BOGO.
Exactly. There you go. We'll do a BOGO. How about that? I'll give you the second one for free. Not only half off, but free. We'll see. So first of all, loyalty. That was, really what we see as the theme for holiday and beyond, because it's so expensive for customer acquisition these days. So it's how do you create this stickiness? How are you better understanding who that consumers are? How are you turning that data about the consumers over to themselves so they can make more informed decisions anywhere? And so there's been a big thrust, and it's not just loyalty by itself, but there's this actually interesting trifecta that I was just talking to a customer about earlier today, which is loyalty plus data plus AI creates this really amazingness around personalization. So that's one. The second one, and I'm showing my bias because I already talked about the store once or twice before. And as you know, I grew up in retail. I grew up in the store. Store operations, retail operations are going to really come up to the forefront in terms of what's required to rethink about your operational model for the store in light of the demand that is generated and the demand that is fulfilled online for and from the physical store and the implications on operations.
Well, it's great discussion. Now, what's the best way? Two questions, last kind of questions. What's the best way to get in touch with you if listeners want to learn more about what you do, about Salesforce? I think you're a LinkedIn person, and you guys publish just a bonanza of great insights. Where do we go to find all that stuff?
Yeah. So for me personally, certainly you can find me on LinkedIn. I definitely like to create that as a platform for knowledge and interaction and community. Retail Rob Garf as well on Twitter. But I'd say more broadly with Salesforce, go on salesforce.com. Like I said, our benchmarks are available for anyone, built on Tableau, so they scale. And particularly during Cyber Week, check it out daily because we're updating that at least by 9 o'clock Eastern time with real-time data. So you can slice and dice it by geography, by vertical, see how you're doing vis-a-vis the entire industry, and look out for our All Wrapped Up coming out right after the new year, right before NRF, to really get a great sense of what we saw for the entire holiday and what we anticipate moving forward.
Nice. Hey, quick question on Salesforce, big website, lots going on. Is there a specific link to go find your content? Is it on learning or is that the best place in the nav to click?
Good call. Yeah. So go to salesforce.com/resources /shopping-insights.
All right. We'll put that link in the show notes as well. Listen, you mentioned NRF. I'll be there. I'm sure you'll be there. It's a big event, so I look forward, hopefully, to come across you in the vastness of the Javits Center. But until then, thanks so much for joining me on the mic. Yet again, providing your insights and continued success for you and the company. And thanks for joining me on the Voice of Retail podcast.
It's always a pleasure, my friend. I only hope when I see you next, we can have some barbecue together.
Right on. Thanks for tuning into this episode of the Voice of Retail. If you haven't already, follow on your favorite podcast platform so new episodes will land automatically each week. And be sure and check out my other retail industry media properties, the Remarkable Retail Podcast with Steve Dennis and the Global E-Commerce Leaders Podcast. I'm your host, Michael LeBlanc, Senior Retail Advisor, Keynote Speaker, Rethink Retail 2023 Global Top Retail Influencer. If you want more content or chat, follow me on LinkedIn. Safe travels, everyone.